Hello, 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 everybody. Happy Marvelous Monday. I'm super excited that you are joining me today. I am your host, Karissa Spann, the Landlord and Tenant Coach. Today, I'm going to share some information. I heard your concerns, I heard your complaints. Those of you who are tenants, those of you who have been watching me over the months, over the years, I've had a lot of concerns and inquiries regarding housing inspection. And so today I'm going to share a lot of information today. I promise that the information that I give is not legal advice. However, I will be sharing the industry's best tips and practices for landlords as well as tenants. Do me some favors, show me some love in the comment section. Let me know which platform you're watching on. I am live on Facebook, I'm live on YouTube, and I'm also live on LinkedIn. If this is your first time joining me, welcome. If you're watching a replay, put replay in the comment section. I do want to acknowledge some comments who have come in. So give me 1 second. Hello, Kimberly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, Cecilia. Thank you so much for tuning in from Facebook. I hope that you are well. Listen, the information that I share today, if you find it helpful, if you find it of any value, please like, tag, and share it with another landlord or with another tenant today. I'm discussing today. Thought provoking, as well as engaging topic about failed housing inspections. I know that this is something that a lot of people are concerned about, especially those of you who are landlords and maybe you've failed some housing inspections, whether it was on a federal, state, or local level, and there are consequences that come behind a failed inspection. And sometimes it's not favorable for the landlord because tenants, they obviously know in some areas resources that are available to them. Okay, so I do want to share this information today. And again, thank you so much for joining me. And I promise that my one mission today is to make sure that I share information, to make sure that it's clear, and to make sure that I answer any questions that you have. All right, so the discussion today is, again, is all about failed inspections, what landlords and tenants should know. All right, so that's what I'm going to touch on today. If you have comments, if you have questions, remarks, or observations, go ahead and throw it in the comment section for me. All right, so I do want to get straight into it because whether you are a landlord, whether you are a tenant, the most important thing is understanding the implications surrounding this topic today of failed housing inspections. Okay, so today I am going to cover the top 3 things that landlords as well as tenants should know. And if you are not a landlord, if you're not a tenant, maybe you are a housing provider or you know someone who fits any of the above categories that I just named. This segment is for them. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I come on, I share relevant information for landlords and tenants to help the entire rental community. I promise you that it costs nothing but your time to show up to get this information. All right. So I do want to just put an emphasis on housing inspections. All right. I see you tuning in, you chiming in from YouTube. Thank you so much. Hey, Ronnie, thank you so much for tuning in. I want to put an emphasis on understanding roles, responsibilities, as well as rights on both sides of the aisle, right? For landlords as well as tenants when it comes to housing inspections. All right. Housing inspections, they are crucial for maintaining a safe and habitable rental property. I've shared previously on one of my segments that a landlord's or a housing provider's job is to provide rental housing that's decent, safe, and sanitary. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's a single family house, it could be an apartment, it could be a condo, a mobile home. Regardless of the type of rental unit, there is still laws that dictates and it governs how a landlord, a property manager should treat that rental business. At the end of the day, it is a business. Okay. And those of you who've been following me for some time, you already know my philosophy, right? That is, if you treat it like a business, it will pay you like a business. Okay. But if you treat it like a hobby, it should pay you like a hobby, right? And let's also agree that bricks and mortars don't pay rent. Bricks and mortar don't pay rent, meaning that vacant rental property does not put money in the bank. Okay, and if you are operating a rental property business, you want to make sure that you understand the laws about inspections. Okay, so there are three sets of laws. With the exception of the District of Columbia. There are federal laws, there are state laws, and there are local laws, and landlords are required to know what those laws are. I get it. I know that a lot of landlords don't know this, right? A lot of you may not be knowledgeable or aware of what the laws are on each of those levels in the jurisdiction that your rental property is in. Okay, but let me just say that it is your job to get that information. This is why I do what I do. I am a property management educator. I teach property management. I have clients that I walk through the process. They have rental property, hundreds of doors, and I help them to understand what they can and cannot do. I help them get around the loopholes or the traps, is what someone said today. Karissa, I feel like they're just traps thrown all around me and I can't seem to dodge them. Well, if you feel like you're in that boat, guess what? You are not alone. But this is what I do. I enjoy sharing this information. It's free 99. So let me just get into it. So today, the first thing that I am going to cover is the legal compliance and the tenant protection. Okay, so this information that I'm sharing first, the first portion of this segment is for landlords, and then the end, I'm going to share some tips for tenants, if that's all right. If at any time you have questions, go ahead and throw it in the comment section and I will respond to it. Hey, Teresa, thank you for tuning in. Your question is, how do we make sure tenant repairs their damage and landlord is not held responsible for their damage? That's a good question. And I see your comment that the inspector often tag landlords. And so let me just answer this way. So Teresa, if for instance, let me just assume, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Let's just assume that the rental property is the tenant is maybe in some sort of housing subsidy program, right? And let's say if the tenant is maybe in Section 8 or rapid rehousing or one of those programs, housing inspectors will come out to assess the property, right? And sometimes, Teresa, what happens is the inspector will cite the landlord because it may be something that you're responsible for, but you can always charge the tenant. Okay, so I'm going to use this as an example, and also just by way of announcement, I'm also a housing quality standard inspector. So I've been in the property management real estate industry for almost 3 decades in various capacities: property management, real estate agent, housing inspector, public housing authority, voucher program, all that stuff, right? So let's just say, Teresa, that you have a tenant that's in a housing subsidy program and the inspector came out. They cited you for, let's just say, something electrical in nature. But let's just say that the tenant or their kids or maybe someone who frequents the property, they pulled the outlet, right? The outlet cover from out the wall, right? From off the wall, and it's completely hanging. Or maybe they pulled the ceiling fan down and the wires are hanging, but yet the tenant did not notify you, right? And so the inspector's job ultimately is to make sure that the place is safe, right? So I said it's supposed to be decent, it's supposed to be safe and sanitary. So in situations like that, the inspector may cite you, right? Although it's not your fault. We know you didn't go in there, you didn't tear the things from out the wall, you didn't, you're not responsible for the ceiling fan hanging, just on a wire or something like that, right? But ultimately, as the owner, treat it as if you want to treat that tenant the way that you would treat any other tenant. Go ahead and take care of the problem, communicate with the tenant, right, in writing, letting them know, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we're aware of this situation. We're sorry that this happened to you. We're going to take care of it. However, in accordance to your rental lease agreement, let me just put an emphasis that it should be in the lease, okay? Because you cannot enforce, Teresa, what's not in writing. All right. So You want to make sure that you send that tenant a letter to communicate whatever the issue is or the issues are. Let them know that they will be responsible for the cost of the repair or the replacement of that item. Okay. And then you'll follow up with that inspection office to say that the problem has been taken care of. The one thing that I would not advise you to do is to go back and forth with the inspector. Just go ahead and take care of the problem, because if the inspection is connected to any type of fines, fees, penalties, reduction in payment, I would say err on the side of caution, use wisdom, go ahead and make the repair, but just go ahead and charge the tenant the full cost. Also, giving them time to pay for it. So, for instance, one of the things that I do is I tell my clients this, Karissa. Let the tenant know what the cost is. Tell them that they have 30 days to either pay in full or to enter into a payment agreement, whereas they are paying you the money back for what you have paid. And so hopefully you have a maintenance escrow where you have money available to take care of repairs. If not, go ahead and start doing that gradually. Just take something, and whatever the amount is, and just put it in a maintenance escrow account for your rental property. So, Teresa, I see your comment that it is regarding doors, bedroom doors being punched or kicked in. So we already know you didn't do it, right? That's a no-brainer. And hopefully the inspector will cite the tenant, because that is a tenant failed item. Now, Teresa, here's the thing. Just depending on the type of tenant that you have, meaning that if the tenant is in some sort of housing subsidy program, if the inspector, feel free to email me. I'll drop my email address so that you can email me. And I don't want to go too deep into the woods on your specific situation. But Teresa, let's just say that you have a tenant who's in the Section 8 program. Okay. And if the inspector is citing you for something that the tenant is responsible for, and the inspector can actually cite the tenant, then that is something that you can actually dispute. There's a way that you could do that. There's a process available through that agency if it is through the housing authority. So feel free to email me, and I would love to get more information about your particular situation so that I can help guide you. All right. So let me share some information today that I've prepared. So as we're talking about inspections, here's again what I want landlords to understand. All right. Here's the first thing. Inspections, they are crucial. It helps to identify hazards, right? So you have to understand that when you conduct these inspections, whether it's a housing program or it's a market tenant, it preserves the quality of the property. That's number one. That's why you should be doing inspections. It also ensures safety and well-being for the tenants, because remember, I said that housing should be decent, safe, and sanitary. You should be conducting regular inspections, and it doesn't matter if it's once a year, if it's twice a year, if it's quarterly. You should be conducting regular inspections. If you have someone managing the property for you, they should be conducting the inspections, right? And so you want to proactively address maintenance issues. It could be electrical, it could be plumbing, it could be structural, emergency hazard, whatever. You want to proactively address the maintenance issues when you are made aware. And so sometimes you don't know the condition of the property unless you are actually inspecting them. Okay. And then also understand that by conducting inspections, it reduces the risk of injuries or life-threatening situations. So, Teresa, I want to come back to you. Your comment where this tenant kicked in the doors. So if you or your managing agent is conducting inspections, sometimes it's doing that inspection that you're able to pick up on issues and problems and repairs that are needed. Don't wait until an agency send a letter to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, thank you for being a participant in our program. We are going to come and inspect the place. Don't wait for them to come out to do the inspection. All right. Go ahead and just proactively make preparation to inspect the rental property. That way you know the condition. All right. So you want to make sure that you are in compliance with all standards. Remember, I said that there are federal, there are state, and there are local laws. And so inspections, it protects the health as well as the comfort of tenants, because that's a requirement by law that a lot of landlords are not aware of. Landlords, please know that you can verify whatever the required standards are and resolve deficiencies. Okay. And also, this is important because you want to maintain a positive reputation. You don't want to be cited as a slum landlord. I shared some stories recently, whereas some landlords have been taken to court. So the tenants took the landlord to court. The the courts came down really heavy on the landlord. As a matter of fact, laws are changing in some jurisdictions, making it a whole lot harder for landlords. You don't want to be in the hot seat. Okay. So go ahead and take care of those inspections in advance. Okay. I see your comment. You're welcome, Teresa. It's my pleasure. Ronnie, you said what to do when tenants will not let you in to do routine inspections. That is a great question. So here's the thing. If tenants are not cooperating, they're not allowing you in to conduct inspections, send the tenant a letter. Unfortunately, we cannot control the behavior. Listen, you can be the nicest, the most responsive, the most caring, loving person, landlord, owner in the world. But you will find sometimes that there are going to be tenants who just will not cooperate. It's almost as if they intentionally wake up on the wrong side of the aisle. And I affectionately refer to them as tenants from hell. It's not a bashing, it's just the reality. So, but again, I'm a landlord and a tenant coach. So I advocate for tenants, but I don't advocate for bad seeds or outliers, right? So if you are having that issue, send the tenant a letter, letting the tenant know that you're coming to inspect the property. If they are not cooperating, send them a follow-up letter, letting them know that they are in violation of the lease, and hopefully it's in the lease. If they're in a housing program, that's definitely a violation. And so if your tenant is in any type of housing subsidy program, if there's any assistance attached or assigned to that tenant, if the government is paying you, if it's just an ounce of a penny, contact either that social worker, the case manager, the housing specialist. If you're not able to get a resolve there, then escalate that up to a supervisor so that the agency who's responsible for payment will understand that this tenant is violating their family obligations because they are required to adhere to the program rules and regulations. So that's a great question. Thank you for that. All right, so now let me go to my next one here. All right, so when it comes to housing inspections, there is a legal requirement, okay? Um, and I want to put an emphasis on that because I don't want landlords to end up in a hot seat. Landlords and tenants, see how I have that underlined, bold? Yeah, landlords and tenants must adhere to laws and regulations. It's not just landlords. And although I know that in some jurisdictions, um, the laws are in favor of tenants, and so it may seem like it's unfair for landlords. I get it. But the laws are in place, not just for landlords, but for tenants as well. Right. So, but then there are all specific laws which would dictate the frequency of inspections. Right. So if it's a program that's connected to that rental property or to that tenant, rather, they'll dictate how often the inspector will come out to inspect the property. You want to make sure that you comprehend what the laws are, because when I find that when owners comprehend the law, this helps to ensure that they are in compliance. So they already know what's expected of them. They already know what they should be doing, right? And this also demonstrate commitment to providing decent, safe, and sanitary, right, housing. But when landlords are not in compliance, even tenants, sometimes there are fines, there are legal consequences, and in many cases, if there's a business license, sometimes the business license can be revoked. Okay, so let me pause. I'm going to go to my comment section. And you said, doesn't DC law state landlord only has to give 48-hour notice? Great question. Yes, that's correct. So the laws have changed in DC, whereas the law required 24-hour notice. Now it is 48-hour notice in DC. All right. So know what the laws are in the jurisdiction that your rental property is in. Hey, Darius, thank you so much for tuning in. All right. So let me go to my next point. I do want you to get this information today. Here is what I want you to know. There are common reasons for failed inspections. So I lumped them in three categories. For maintenance repairs that are neglected, that could consist of plumbing, it could consist of electrical, structural, as well as pest infestation. It could be under the category of health and sanitation, whereas the inspection may fail because of mold, mildew, poor ventilation. We know that ventilation is definitely important in the bathroom. It could be because of pest or vermin infestation. Now, I get it. Tenants, poor housekeeping could be the problem for these pest infestation. But at the end of the day, it is the owner responsibility to make sure that the pest control issues are resolved and taken care of. And you can, like I said, if it's in the lease, you can always back charge that tenant. And then the third category is safety standard, which includes smoke detectors. That also includes carbon monoxide detector. It could be for faulty wiring or inadequate security. A door doesn't lock, or old appliances or outdated appliances, right? And so those are the three major categories that inspections fail. Hey, Dee, thank you so much for tuning in, sis. So let me share my next set of information. And so again, after I share this information for landlords, I do have some tips for tenants. So if you are a tenant, if you know someone who's a tenant, please share this with them. All right. But here is what landlords should know. There is such a great importance of promptly addressing issues. I promise that a leaking faucet, a running toilet will not fix itself. It will not go away. It won't just overnight just stop, right? And so you want to promptly address these issues, right? This will prevent you from having to pay penalties. It would also help you to avoid disputes. And it also increases tenant satisfaction. Here's what I know. All tenants are not bad tenants, okay? But most tenants, I won't say all, but usually tenants will appreciate a landlord who rule with the iron fist. They appreciate landlords who is responsible and make sure they take care of repairs, right? Remember I said you don't want that bad reputation. You don't want to be considered a slum landlord. And this also helps you maintain and preserve the value of the rental property. At the end of the day, it is a business, right? I said if you treat it like a business, it's going to pay you like a business. If you treat it like a hobby, it's going to pay you like a hobby. All right. So I want you to understand the importance of inspections. When it comes to landlords, you have three key responsibilities. You should be fixing these issues timely, but don't just show up, right? You want to promptly respond to tenant requests as well as their maintenance emergencies. Treat it like a business. What happens if you don't put money into your business? It doesn't grow. And what you feed will grow, what you starve will die. And so if you're not taking care of repairs, you are starving the success of that rental property. Communicate and document, right? Communicate with the tenant, communicate what your actions are. If it's something major, for instance, if there's a flooding, the tenant may be in a basement unit or lower level and it floods. If it's going to cause a possible disruption, communicate that to the tenant so that they will know what to expect. And you also want to maintain proper documentation. Here's why. Because one of the things that I often share is that you want to create a paper trail, right? And if you are communicating with your tenants, even if it's over the phone, still follow with a letter in writing, communicating what your actions are, because guess what? At the end of the day, let me come back to the slide. At the end of the day, let's just say, for instance, there's some sort of maintenance emergency. You've communicated by phone, and I know sometimes that's what you must do because I've managed thousands of doors over the years in my tenure of almost 30 years in property management. I've had calls in the middle of the night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, where maybe there was a fire or a flood, a pipe burst or something. And I had to abruptly meet my maintenance crew, contractors, or whoever at the property. At the end of the day, I'm going to make sure that the repairs are completed. And this is what I tell my clients. And then also follow up, stating what actions you've taken and what the next steps are. That's going to be so important because sometimes tenants will give a negative report that the landlord hasn't done their job, the landlord hasn't communicated, they haven't heard from the landlord. And I saw a question from Ronnie where the tenant wouldn't allow the landlord to come in. And that happens even in emergencies, right? So always follow up with that documentation. All right, so let me go back to the slide here. You want to follow up with an inspection. So after you complete the repairs, follow up to make sure that the repairs are completed. Here's why that is so important. Because I am also a housing inspector, I've been in housing pretty much my entire career. I don't make repairs, well, I can't make minor repairs, but that's another story. I know what the repair should look like. And so because I'm a housing inspector, I already know that if there's a repair that has to be made to some drywall, that it should be smooth, it should be sanded, right? It should be painted. I understand what's required. And so I'm going to follow up to make sure that all the repairs are satisfactory. I'm going to make sure that the repairs are not just satisfactory, but that it also meet the requirement of whatever the housing standard is. And especially, let me just put an emphasis here, especially if the property is, for instance, in a tenant friendly jurisdiction, such as DC, right? Especially if the rental property is in any type of housing program, whereas the program can stop payment, you want to make sure that you verify the repairs are completed. Now, here's what I've found out over the years. I've sent contractors or maintenance guys or the handyman to make repairs, right? And there were times where many, many years ago where I didn't follow up and I just believed that the repairs were completed. Maybe they were, maybe they were not. Maybe the tenant went behind to damage the property intentionally or accidentally. I don't know. But all I know is that when you don't follow up, sometimes you leave room for the unexpected to happen. Okay. And you don't want to leave that. You don't want to leave your destiny in control of the tenant or the maintenance person. I had a young lady who sent her maintenance guy out, and the tenant kept complaining, listen, your maintenance guy, he's not doing the work completely. He's not thorough. He's not following up. He's not cleaning up his mess. And the landlord did not believe the tenant. True story. So for whatever reason, the landlord disputed with the tenant. Something happened at the property. The contractor painted and they scraped the old paint. They didn't do a good job cleaning it up. It was lead in the paint. Okay. And for those of you who know about the issues of lead-based paint, it can create issues. And so there were some young children in the property. So the tenant had little babies who ingested some of this paint. It got into the bloodstream and the child got sick. The child was rushed to the hospital, and that tenant ended up suing the landlord for thousands of dollars. This is why it's important to make sure that you follow up to make sure repairs are completed. Make sure that it meets the requirement. If you have to send anybody back to make the repairs, it's always in your best interest to do that versus leaving that repair partially completed, and then you take the chance of not getting money, or you take the chance of maybe someone getting sick, like I shared in this situation. You take the chance of being fined or having penalties assessed to it, right? You don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So take this information and advice that I'm sharing today. So let me go to my next slide for you. And then I'm coming to the comments in the comment section. So the 3 steps that landlords should take to resolve the matter and to comply. Promptly assess the situation and plan it out. So when you're made aware of whatever the problem is, or the problems are, plan to make it no longer an issue. You want to identify the root cause. So, for instance, if a toilet is running, right, the solution is not to turn it off at the back of the toilet, right? The solution is not to turn the water off. The solution should be identify the root cause and correct it at the root. You also want to engage in quality professional service providers. Let me come back on the screen for this one. If you are a landlord and you know that you need major electrical repairs or renovations, please don't send a handyman, right? I've had I've had people who, for whatever reason, I've gone behind people just doing an inspection, right? The follow-up inspection, and for whatever reason, the electrician put duct tape on it, did not really correct the problem, as if duct tape is the cookie cutter solution. All right. You want to make sure that you get quality professionals to do the work. I get it. I'm getting the bad looks. I know I'm going to get some emails, some text messages, as well as phone calls behind this comment. I know that sometimes finances it may be an issue. Finances may be a hindrance in completing the repairs, right? I don't really care about that. The government don't really care about that, right? The laws don't care that you don't have the money to send a professional out. Because if you send a handyman to put duct tape on something that requires a major overhaul, right, you could end up getting sued by the tenant. You could put yourself in a very bad position to have a lawsuit filed against you for failure and neglect. All right. So keep in mind that it should be decent, it should be safe, and a safety issue, electrical hazard, that's a no-no. That's not anything you want to play around with. You don't want to send somebody there with duct tape. If that's your strategy, if that's your business model, please change it. If not, then if something happens, nobody can say, well, I didn't know, because you're watching and you're hearing this information. All right. So if you know someone who's operating according to that business model, maybe tell them now's their time to step it up. All right. And so I shared before that if there is a business license connected or associated with that rental property, that it could be revoked. Let me also put an emphasis on this, because this segment is not about business licenses, right? But if you do not have a rental license, a renter's license, a business license, depending on the jurisdiction, the title, the name is going to be different, right? If you don't have it and you're operating a rental property business, please make sure that you get that, because some courts now, the judges will not allow you to take your tenant to court, even if the tenant is wrong, even if the tenant has completely destroyed, right, the rental property. In many jurisdictions now, if you do not have a renter's license, a business license to operate a legal rental business, that case can be kicked out of court. All right. So don't go down that rabbit hole. All right. So regular and preventive maintenance. You want to definitely prioritize regular maintenance as well as preventive maintenance measures to avoid future problems. So here is what I would suggest to you. I see your comments. I'm going to come back to the comment section. And again, if you have questions or comments, please put in the comment section. I will respond to it. So with the maintenance, right? Let me just put a great emphasis. Let me just put a quarter in the meter and park here for a few seconds. With maintenance, I know that it can be challenging to get someone that you feel is giving you a correct price and not overcharging you. I've seen contractors rip owners off. If you feel that you're having an issue, you need some contractors, you can listen, you can Google contractors, whether it's electricians or carpenters or plumbers or handyman. You can go on Craigslist, you can go on Angie's List, reach out to organizations, ask people that are connected to you, right? So you're watching by way of some form of social media, whether you're watching my Facebook, my YouTube, or my LinkedIn channel. Reach out to people on social media. Hey, I'm in need of a contractor. I'm in need of a licensed electrician or master plumber or whatever, right? Don't be afraid to ask. And if you feel like you're being ripped off, if you feel like you're being overcharged, definitely get multiple quotes. I have clients, and I promise they swear by multiple quotes. I don't care if somebody quote them $50. I have worked with clients over the years, whereas they will get 3 quotes on $50, right? Because they value their business and they want to make sure they're not being overcharged. So I just want you to understand that. All right. So I have some information for tenants, but let me go to the comment section, that I'm going to come back. Let me come back to the slide. Give me 1 second, because I want to share some additional information for tenants. So let me come back to this slide here. All right. Hey, Fatima. Thank you so much for tuning in. You said you requested an inspection for a basic business license, and the inspector did one on 1 unit of a 2-family unit building. It passed for unit 2, but did not for unit 1. Can I pay for the basic business license with 1 unit past inspection? So, and that's a great question, Fatima. And so if the Department of Building, if it's in DC, they now changed it from DCRA to now Department of Building. Hello, Bishop Charity. Thank you so much for tuning in, man of God. So Fatima, if it is, I would say check with that inspector's office, because it depends on the inspector. But usually, if it's 2 units, they must, if they say they must inspect 2 units, then usually both of those units must pass. But I've seen that some inspectors are a little lenient. They'll pass it with just 1 unit, right? I've seen some inspectors, whereas maybe there's a two unit building and they only inspect 1, and they intentionally don't inspect the second one because the first one passed. So it just depends on how you're taking care of the property. It also depends on that inspector. I would say follow up with that inspector's office and see what information you can get, without really, revealing that you failed that unit, because you can just call and ask a general question without going too deep in the woods about what the issue is, because you don't want to open up a can of worms. So thank you so much for that question. All right, so now let me go back to my tips for tenants, because again, I share information for landlords, and I'm also sharing information for tenants. Okay, so tenant tips. The first is that tenants, please communicate with your landlord. If you're having issues, contact your landlord, whether it's before, whether it's during, or after the inspection. Okay. Communicate with your landlord, because you want to make sure that if there's anything wrong, you're not held accountable. So, for instance, one of the things that I include in my lease is this: if the tenant, for instance, has maybe a bed bug or roach, it's the tenant's responsibility. Now, this is in my rental lease agreement, right? If the tenant identifies, see, or come into awareness that there's some sort of pest control issue, 1 roach, 1 bed bug, 1 spider, 1 ant, they are responsible to notify me right away. Because if the property becomes infested, now the cost that it takes to get rid of whatever the pests are, I'm now going to pass that on to the tenant, because they're responsible for infestation. Now, I'm not saying that they're responsible for the roach. Although I don't live there, I'm not responsible for their housekeeping. I am saying to them in writing, in this legally binding contract, which is a rental lease agreement, that they are responsible to notify me when they see a problem. And if they fail to do it, that's neglect on their part. I will still be responsible for the payment, however, right? So if it's bed bugs, we already know, some of us who are knowledgeable, right? We've been in the industry for a while, whether we manage property, whether we own it. A bed bug problem is sometimes a costly problem, and it's not even a cookie cutter solution, really, because it just depends on how bad the problem is. True story. So I was managing a property, and I think this property had almost 300 doors. And one of the apartments there was severely infested with bed bugs, and it was so bad for so long that, for whatever reason, the prior property manager before me never did anything about the problem. And because the bed bug problem was so horrific, that maintenance, contractors, nobody would go in a unit to make the repairs. All right. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, it was a senior, was an elderly guy. I think he was over 90 years old, living in the property. And repairs had gone incomplete for so many years that when you went in the bathroom, um, the man couldn't even take a bath because the tub was it was just rusted. It rusted down to the floor level. He was on the first floor level, so it rusted down to like the floor, almost the ground level, where you can literally see a hole where it rusted out. That didn't happen overnight. In the kitchen, he had a leak, and it had been leaking for so long that the cabinets had fallen off the wall. Were literally on the floor. Right, this man, he was elderly. It wasn't really a whole lot he could do for himself. So when you open the base of the kitchen cabinet, there were spider webs and just rotted wood, and it was just so heartbreaking to see that. And so one of the things that I did, I just got a group of people. I said, hey, listen, we're just going to put on a hazmat suit. We're going to go in with the tenant's consent, of course, to help him remove some of the issues that contributed to the bed bugs. So there were other issues. He was a hoarder. He had newspapers from like 1900 or something like that. I mean, he just had so much stuff, and it was packed up. It was packed up so high, right? It was just stacked on top of each other. And in order to correct the problem, we had to help him to understand that he had to get rid of some of that stuff because um, I did have a pest control company to come in, and they said, Karissa, there is no way that we can treat this place with heat, and we definitely can't treat it with chemicals. They said if we use heat to try to get rid of the bed bugs, the whole apartment will go up in smoke because he had that much stuff, right? And so this is why I share this information, because I want landlords and property managers to understand the role that you play. And fortunately for that property, they were not fined, right? But me coming into acknowledgement and awareness of the issues, it was my responsibility, right, to make sure that it was abated because I couldn't allow anything to happen on my watch. And so I had to work with the tenant, and for whatever reason, I don't know if he maybe didn't communicate with the landlord or whatever, and requested the repairs or whatever. But um, tenants, I do want you to understand that you do have a role to play. So please communicate with your landlord, because if not, they can definitely hold you responsible and accountable for the costs associated with it, even if you are participating in a housing program. Because here's the thing, housing programs don't prevent you from paying unless you are in a housing program that says you must not pay. But if you are in a program and the landlord can charge you, they absolutely should charge you if you are responsible. All right, here's my second tip for tenants today. Allow the landlord time to make ample repairs. I know that in so many jurisdictions, a tenant will say, oh, well, my landlord hasn't made repairs, so I'm not paying my rent. But they just notified the landlord like 2 hours ago, right? So give your landlord time to make the repairs. Allow them to come in and to make the repairs, because landlords, there's no law that says a landlord must have a heart, right? Landlords don't have to care. And so if you have a landlord who cares, please give them time to make the repairs. All right. And then also, here's a third tip for tenants today. Understand that you do have rights, right? Tenants have rights. Understand the laws, whether they're federal, whether they're state or local laws. Tenants do have rights. And so that's what I wanted to share for tenants today. I know I shared a lot of information. I'll probably do like a part two. I hope that this information was helpful for you. If you're a landlord, if you tuned in late, please watch the replay. Please like, tag, and share it with somebody else. Sharing is caring. Again, it costs you absolutely nothing but your time to show up and to get this information. I am Karissa Spann. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30. If you have questions, if you have comments, please put it in the comment section, but you can also email me. Here is my email address. All right, my email address is at the bottom of the screen. It is karissaspann@gmail.com. karissaspann@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please make sure that you are tuned in each and every Monday. And also, please make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. I'm live on Mondays on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. All right, so if you have any last minute questions or comments, please throw it in the comment section. If not, I'm going to log off for now. I'm going to say that my time is up. I thank you for yours. I look forward to tuning in with you all next week right here on one of these platforms to share this paramount information for landlords, for tenants, and anybody in the housing professional arena. I'm Karissa Spann. I'll see you all next week.